Please stay standing. Welcome to St. Croix Lutheran Academy. We would like to welcome our esteemed guests, the veterans of our nation's armed forces. Especially, we would like to welcome our speakers for today, Student Body President Sam Schaefer and Sergeant Caleb and Catherine Oberg. The Pledge of Allegiance was written in August of 1892 by a minister by the name of Francis Bellamy. It was originally published in the Youth Companion on September 8, 1892. Bellamy had hoped the pledge would be used by citizens in any country. In 1954, in response to the communist threat of the times, President Eisenhower encouraged Congress to add the words, "under God," creating the 31-word pledge we say today. The lyrics of the Star-Spangled Banner came from a poem written on September 14, 1814 by 35-year-old lawyer and poet Francis Scott Key. The name of the poem was Defense of Fort McHenry, written during the bombardment of that fort during the War of 1812. The Star-Spangled Banner was first recognized for official use by the United States Navy in 1889. In 1931, the U.S. Congress passed a joint resolution making the song the national anthem, which President Hoover signed into law. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then our band will lead us in the Star-Spangled Banner. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Samuel Schaefer is a senior here at St. Croix Lutheran Academy and serves as our student body president. Sam has an exemplary record of involvement and excellence as a student, as a leader, and as a Christian young man. He is involved in sports and other activities, but his leadership in the halls and in the public spotlight of being the student body president is where he shines the brightest. Please join me in welcoming student body president Sam Schaefer.
Good morning. My name is Sam Schaefer, and as Mr. Cleese just said, I have the opportunity to serve as the student body president here at St. Croix. Thank you very much for coming out today for our Veterans Day tribute. Veterans, it's very good to see you all here today. I'm thankful for this day where we can take the opportunity to appreciate you and all veterans throughout this nation's history. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your service. There are a lot of people who may have trouble understanding what thank you for your service really means. Maybe they haven't been around veterans, or they aren't in a military family. They might know some details of what a veteran went through, but ultimately it is challenging, as only the veteran truly knows what they experienced. Being in a military family has helped me to understand more of the sacrifices that veterans and their families make for us. My family has a long military history, from the Civil War to the War on Terror. My relative Louis Schaefer fought in the Battle of Vicksburg and died from his wounds some years later. Both of my grandfathers were Marines. My grandfather, Robert Schaefer, worked on aircraft carriers in Korea and all over the world. My grandfather, Gareth Clausen, served as a combat engineer in Vietnam. My uncle, Shay Clausen, served as an electronics repair technician in Iraq. And my dad enlisted in the Army his senior year of high school and deployed to Somalia with the Army Rangers. Since then, he has joined the National Guard and currently serves as a colonel today. It is really my dad's service that has shown me what thank you for your service really means. In 2004, my dad was deployed to the war in Afghanistan while my mom was pregnant with me. He was at war and my mom was at home. It's two very different work environments. It was hard for both of them, especially during my birth, when my dad, in Afghanistan, was on the phone with my mom in Minnesota for 9 hours while she labored with me in the hospital. Before my dad left, my parents decided to record video and audio messages from my dad just in case he wasn't able to make it back home. They recorded my dad reading storybooks to me, saying our family prayers, and what a typical day for him looked like. Thanks be to God, he arrived safely back to the U.S. June 8, 2005, my first birthday. Because of those recorded messages, I didn't see him as a stranger when I first met him after 15 months of deployment. Since then, he has traveled a lot, but has only gotten deployed one other time, to Kuwait in 2019. I remember not knowing really how to process the fact that he was going to be gone for an entire year. To help pass the time, our family did monthly countdowns while he was gone, and would celebrate on the last day of each month with a special dinner or activity. That deployment was different, as we had email and FaceTime, instant communication between countries. However, all this technology did not change the fact that he was gone, serving his country again far from home. American soldiers around the world throughout history, like my dad, selflessly sacrificed their own safety and time for our safety and time here at home. They volunteer themselves for this, not knowing if they will ever be recognized or remembered for their service. This is what Veterans Day is about. It is there to remind us, the civilians, what our veterans sacrificed for us and for this country. When we say, thank you for your service, we can really mean it, even if we do not fully understand it. Classmates and teachers, I would challenge you to talk to the veterans you meet. It doesn't matter if it is at home or at the grocery store, each interaction is important. Let them know that you appreciate what they did for you. Make it your mission to be committed to our nation's veterans, so that you can really mean it when you say, thank you for your service. And veterans, thank you for all you've done for us and for this country. The benefits we have in this great nation are because of you and your sacrifice. From the cooks to the generals, you've all played a vital role in this nation's history, and we will never forget. Thank you for your service.
At this time, we will play the Salute to America's Finest, which is a favorite of our Veterans Day celebrations. Each of the marches for the branches of the military will be played. Please stand when the march for your branch of service is played. were not competitive. I think Air Force had the most. It was hard to count for my seat, though. So. Catherine Oberg was born in Shakopee, Minnesota, attended elementary school at Bloomington Lutheran, and then high school here at St. Croix Lutheran. She enlisted in the Minnesota Army National Guard, and after graduating in 2004, she left for military training. She served as an avionics mechanic on Black Hawk helicopters for 9 years. In 2007 and 2008, she was deployed to Balad, Iraq, as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Caleb Oberg was born in Edina, Minnesota, and raised in Minnetonka. He was homeschooled for most of his school years until his senior year of high school, where he attended Armstrong High School in Plymouth, graduating in 2002. He enlisted in the Minnesota Army National Guard, where he still works today. This December will be his 20-year anniversary in the military. He has served 2 different year-long deployments, one to Balad, Iraq in 2006 and 2007 as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and the other to Kuwait in 2019 and 20, supporting Operation Spartan Shield. The 2 of them together first met in Kuwait in 2007 when her unit was moving overseas to begin deployment and Caleb's unit was beginning the process to move home again. Not the best timing, by the way. After a few years of dating, they were married and now have been blessed with 2 children, Haley and Alex. Please join me in welcoming Sergeant Caleb and Catherine Oberg.
We want to start by thanking everyone for the invitation, and we are very proud to stand in the ranks of all of the veterans and military service people that we have here today. 21 years ago, I was walking through these very halls as a sophomore in high school when the news slowly spread among the students and faculty that the World Trade Center had been attacked. Many of us took an opportunity to walk into the library to see what was happening, as that was the only TV or source of information that we had at that time to find out what was going on. That day in history changed the course for so many people in this country. I had never really felt the need or want to be part of the military. It was never something ingrained in my thoughts, despite the multiple family members that I had served, or that had served in one branch or another. Something shifted in my mind, though. As junior year started, many of my classmates also started those conversations of what do we do after high school. But for me, there was only one option that slowly gained focus. I was going to go into the military. Now, as a junior, I was 16 and just had to wait till December when I would be 17 and could join, with my parents' permission, of course. It wouldn't be until April that I would finally convince them to sign the paperwork and allow me to enlist in the Minnesota National Guard. Senior year flew by faster than most of us wanted it to. I graduated. 3 weeks later, my baby sister was born. 5 days after that, I was on a plane heading to start basic training and my advanced job training. In total, my training had taken me away from home for close to 42 weeks. I was able to have a short trip home over Christmas, but that was it. It was a strange thing to be on your own, but really have no freedoms or knowledge of anything around you. Whenever I was having a rough week or mandatory fun days, which were never something you really wanted to participate in, or just missing home and the connections of friends and family that once were. In those moments is where I found the comfort in those hymns and Bible verses that our teachers worked so hard on us remembering. In 2006 and 2007, 2008, I was deployed to Iraq. I came home and started my job as an avionics mechanic on the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in summer schedule that we were told the Guard completes. 2 years later, I was on another plane, but this one was taking myself and my unit off for 4 months of training for our year-long deployment to Balad, Iraq. Our deployment kind of followed the same routine that most of our trainings did. We worked hard, worked some more. We had some time off, and we also made time to make sure to enjoy some part of this together. We would find some ways to celebrate birthdays or holidays, and sometimes, on the less than special of nights, we would all pitch in and our drill masters would get to work on something different than our typical military food. After a full year, we returned home, all a little different than when we had left. Our unique experience forever connecting us.
Good morning, St. Croix staff, faculty, distinguished guests, and veterans. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So you already heard a little bit about my bio, but the military was in the top of my mind, I'd probably say, later on in my high school years. As your school years wind down, you start to kind of figure out what comes next. And I always thought that would be an avenue I would go, but it wasn't until that senior year, as Catherine spoke about, and 9/11 happening, that kind of greased the wheels for me. So in 2002, I joined the Minnesota Army National Guard. You get an opportunity to, kind of pick a few different positions, jobs, and things that might interest you. And so why the Army, might you ask? I had a fascination with aviation and helicopters, specifically, and military helicopters. And no one really flies more of those than the Army. So I'm like, well, if I can get my foot in the door, maybe someday I could be a pilot and fly with me someday. So lucky enough, you get a good score and you can choose an aviation job. So my first job, similar to Catherine's, was as an avionics technician working on the electrical countermeasures radios of the aircraft. I spent most of 2003 from basic training to AIT because it was a long school. It was about 10 months that I was away from home just for my initial training in aviation. A couple of years later, Minnesota was standing up the first Chinook helicopter company, and they were looking for interested individuals that might want to change their jobs and reclass. And that sounded exactly what I wanted to do. It meant also possibly becoming a crew chief, which is one of the active crew members in the back of the CH-47 helicopter while it is flying. So I volunteered to do that with understanding the knowledge that with it came a deployment to Iraq in 2006 and 2007. So that after I reclassed as a Chinook mechanic, that deployment came, and one of the main missions that we did as a Chinook company is cargo. We did internal cargo, flying it around the battlefield. External cargo, as you can see in this image, we were delivering up-armored Humvees to remote bases and outposts that needed them oh so badly. In the Chinook, while you're flying, you have a crew of 5 while you're overseas. You've got your 2 pilots, you've got your flight engineer in the back, a crew chief, and a door gunner. So while we're in the air, we're the eyes and ears at the back of the aircraft, making sure that it's operating well. The pilots don't have all the indications up front for some of the things that we have in the back. But it was kind of a nerve-wracking deployment because it was the middle of the Iraq War, and we flew every night. We had 12 Chinook helicopters in my company, and throughout the course of that deployment, of those 12, 9 of them ended up taking enemy rounds. But thanks to God's grace and providence, we came back with everybody that we left with. Here's a picture of my company on that particular deployment. We were made up primarily in Minnesota and Colorado Army National Guard maintainers and aviators. We had a few augmentees from Florida, New York, and Nebraska as well. This QR code up here, if you are interested at your leisure, is about a 26-minute video documenting what my company did on that deployment. One of the hats that I wore was serving as the unit historian. Photography and videography were kind of a staple in my family growing up, and you see that every now and then coming out at family reunions. And so it wasn't uncommon to see me glued behind a camera or a video camera throughout that deployment. As my deployment in 2007 was winding down. My brother-in-law, who is part of 2nd Battalion 2147 Assault Helicopter Battalion, was also getting ready to head overseas. The laser's not working, but he's in the top center picture right there with me in Kuwait. Kuwait serves as kind of the gateway going to the Middle Eastern theater of operations, whether you're going to Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. You do all your initial and processing, getting acclimatized to the weather, and also serves on the way out as going through customs and making sure that you've got all your equipment. So, as Catherine mentioned, when she was getting ready to go, I broke it. I started seeing pictures of my brother-in-law's deployment ceremonies, and this particular picture kind of drew my attention. It's like, who's this cute little redhead, that's deploying with my brother-in-law? I better figure out, what's going on here. So, of course, that's Catherine, and I had on good authority because my sister was friends with her on social media. I got a little bit of background of her, where she came from, her family life, and kind of piqued the initial curiosity. And it was that those last 2 weeks of deployment when her unit, my brother-in-law's unit, was in Kuwait, and I was just walking across post, not really thinking much of it, and she came walking out of the post exchange, the post store, and I think it was at that point in time that things started to kind of get real. Unfortunately, of course, I'm heading home and she's leaving for a full year. But the initial story.
Let's be clear. I never met him at this point, and he came up to me and said, "You know my brother-in-law, don't you?"
Yes. So I did a little bit more homework, I imagine. Yeah.
So this was my return home. That cute little blonde girl, that is Abby Tollefson, which I know many of you probably know. She was very little when I started my service. So since then, Kayla and I met, got married. We have brought our 2 kids into the world, and my enlistment conveniently ended a month after our daughter was born. So I wrote out my maternity leave, and I decided to stay home with the kids. It worked best for us. We didn't want to have the chance that both of us needed to deploy at the same time. However, like most military families, the deployment wasn't something that we thought would never happen. We ended up waiting until 2019, so that means we were married for 8 years before a deployment actually came into focus for our family. So then he left. Oh, go for it.
Absolutely, deployments do not make the military and marriage any easier, and in fact, it can just be pouring gasoline on the fire. But we thought, we prepared ourselves as much as possible, and it was a completely different experience than either Catherine or I have ever had before. We had some knowledge based off of our previous deployments individually, but for me, I didn't have any family. I didn't have kids back home on my first deployment. We heard some of the stories, did some of the training to teach you some coping, some tricks, being intentional with your relationships, and just how to soften the blow. But it was definitely challenging. And then Catherine too. She wasn't going on this deployment. She had an idea what I would be doing, but now she's left to manage the whole household and the kids and all the daily functions of home, especially not during the easiest years, as we came to find out later on. On this particular deployment, I was assigned to Bravo Company 834th Aviation Support Battalion. I was no longer a crew chief, I was doing quality control for aviation maintenance. So any of the large maintenance, phase maintenance functions that were going on, I would be in the quality control section, going after the maintenance is performed, and then just going through the work package, making sure the maintainers did everything to a T, and kind of just one of the main safety NCOs. This deployment was to Kuwait. Kuwait was more of a support area. We had elements up in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, but they would send their aircraft down to Kuwait, where I was based, for any of the long duration maintenance.
And this is the St. Croix Lutheran farewell from the rooftop as he flew over the day he left.
We flew just east of here on our way down to Fort Hood, Texas, where we spent 2 months getting ready to deploy overseas. So here's a couple pictures. One of me in Kuwait City, experiencing some of the interesting architecture. We did get a lot of opportunities to get into the city because, of course, we all know going into 2020 and the pandemic popping off, they really came down on just health protections and canceled a lot of the morale trips into town. And so this was a particular one near the end of the deployment where I was bringing equipment down to the ports, getting ready to head back overseas. In Kuwait, we performed all our maintenance in these semi-permanent soft top hangars. The Kuwait weather, especially in the middle of the desert, is, as you can imagine, just blowing sand, hot 110 degrees temperature, the occasional dust storm. But then when the post shuts down for the pandemic, then it's quite isolating, for sure. The only thing that really made this deployment, especially with family back home, easier is the ability to have technology. It wasn't as reliable on the first deployment, but thanks to having easy access to internet and the multitude of apps that we have, I was able to communicate with Catherine and the kids daily and try to stay on top of things going on back home. There were opportunities where I could read stories to them over recording. I would send the chips back home, the memory chip back home, and the kids would be able to watch that video and follow along with the book. And that was through the Bob Hope nonprofit program, who supported making that happen for military families as well.
Well, and we sent a battleship board and half the pegs overseas, so that's our son playing battleship with Dad, and then he's helping her with homework up in the corner. But lots of movie nights, we'd sync up movies and then just watch them together over the internet.
So, serving in the military from a Christian perspective, it can be daunting. The military is a secular organization. Yes, it was built, at the beginning of the founding of our country and on Judeo-Christian beliefs, but it's very much a secular organization, and so it can be challenging for your military faith to serve in the military. They do have the chaplain corps, which is responsible for your individual and actually as a whole our spiritual health, and that's no more evident than when you're on deployments for sure. But it can be tough. So what got me and what would get anybody who's looking at the possibility of joining the military someday is find your core group. You make your Bible studies. If you can't find them, create your own, and that way you can still stay sharp in your faith while serving overseas and while you're serving in the military. We're not called to just be, consumed by it and just fall by the wayside with military service. It's a great opportunity to be that salt, to the world, to the country, to the nation, while you're serving honorably. I had the opportunity, this gentleman right here, Chief Warrant Officer 5, Carlos Cascante. He was my boss, I guess you'd say, in my quality control office on this particular deployment. He held weekly Bible studies, and you would always see him, even in the office, he'd have his Bible there. And while opportunities came up that were disparaging, the riots going on back home, just the concern for family, furnaces going out, those type of things. He was always my mentor and just kind of helped me along in keeping my spiritual walk consistent on this deployment. As you can see here, we don't have any lakes or rivers in the middle of the Kuwait Desert, but one of our warrant officers took the opportunity on this deployment to be baptized. You can see our chaplain Deichner there, and then Mr. Cascante assisting with that. So it's a very special opportunity when you also consider the significance of the Middle East and just, this isn't too far, just south of, I guess, Babylon, so it's, you're kind of in a living piece of history that we all read about at some point in time. And so that was a special experience to be able to be a part of that. So this top right picture is a group of us from my original deployment from 2006 who were also together on this one. It's kind of a little blurry, but so even though the Army or the military as an organization is quite vast and large, you will be surprised the people that you see over the years that you've worked with in the past.
So while he was deployed, the turn of events with COVID extended his deployment by a full month. So we had our countdown at home going, but it was a rough day, the day that I had to add a whole another 30 days on that count. But after 374 days, we got to bring him home on another snowy day, just like we sent him off. And it's been good. Reintegration's a little bit hard as a family. You have to figure out how to get that puzzle piece to fit back in with the other parts. But it's been good. And the kids have had a different experience having two military parents. I get thumbs up I got from it. But thank you for your time today.
So, in conclusion on this Veterans Day, I want to thank all the veterans and I know the families as well. You've lived it. You've lived it also. You've sent the care packages, held things together back home. So a huge shout out to the families while your service members have been overseas. It's a very challenging and rewarding experience. As was stated earlier, it'll be 20 years next month, and we'll see how much longer the military has used for me, but looking forward to much family time after that. But I would definitely say for any of the students of St. Croix who are considering the military as an option, I would say definitely go with your gut, go with your heart. Use it as an opportunity after graduation to be a part of something greater than yourself. It doesn't need to just be the military. Whether it could be a nonprofit, it could be some other civil service, but that rewarding experience, that character building experience of being part of something other than just yourself will do wonders for you. Knowing who you are in Christ enables you to take on any challenge. So I would challenge you to keep that in mind as you go off in your future plans and endeavors. So thank you again for this opportunity to speak on this Veterans Day. Thank you.
God Bless America was written by Irving Berlin in 1918 as he served in World War I. 20 years later, famous musician and singer Kate Smith was looking for a song to include in her radio show to mark the 20th anniversary of the end of the Great War. She turned to Irving Berlin for help. Berlin was suffering from an unusual case of composer's block, but then remembered the poem he wrote as a soldier 20 years previously. He dusted off the manuscript from an old footlocker, and the song became an overnight success. America the Beautiful was written in 1892. The author, Catherine Lee Bates, was inspired by Pikes Peak in Colorado to write these words. We too are grateful to our Lord for the wonderful and beautiful country he has given us. The Croyliers, or the band, or the choir will sing God Bless America and America the Beautiful. The assembly is asked to join in on the refrain of America the Beautiful.
America,
sessional, I'd like to say thank you to the people who worked so hard to put this together, and especially our speakers, Caleb and Catherine Oberg and Sam Schaefer. Especially also our Veterans Day Committee Mission Advancement, Christina Leverins, the Music Department under the direction of Mr. John Fensky and Mr. Mike Marquardt, Chris Mackey, Dave Tess, Paul Wine, and many others on the maintenance staff, and of course the students of St. Croix who helped beautify our tribute today. There is a thank you that I need to say that didn't make my notes. Haley Oberg was instrumental in today going really well. So last night, the file size of the presentation was kind of large, and I said, so can you somehow get it into Google Drive? And Catherine said, yes, but I'm not real familiar on how to use it. Like 2 minutes later, the presentation came through, and I found out that Haley, who's an expert in Google Drive, basically said, all you have to do is hit share, and that's all. Haley, thank you for helping today go well. One final thank you to all who served. We are especially proud of our alumni from St. Croix who are veterans. If we missed anyone on our alumni list, please let our Mission Advancement Office know so that we can add them for future years. Veterans and families, please turn to your left when we get outside of the gym doors and wait by the Crusader wall, which is just on the other side of that wall. After all the students and guests have exited the gym, we will return to the gym for pictures, and flag bearers, you should also return to the gym for pictures. Thank you very much.